Okay. So first, before we start, I'll just say that we started our new year a long time ago, and somehow it's already almost the end of our secular year. But we are ready and interested in having sponsorship for people who would like to sponsor our class. And we'd love to welcome you to participate in memory or in honor of somebody. It could be a woman, it doesn't have to be a woman, but somebody in whose merit you would like all of our learning to be in. And as we know that we are all spiritually connected, really spiritually, deeply spiritually connected. And when one of us benefits, it benefits everyone. And to do something in memory or in honor of someone, they get the credit and you get the credit. And if they are no longer in this physical world, then their neshamas are elevated to ever higher and higher spiritual places. And if they are in this world, they will be given additional spiritual strength to fulfill whatever their mission is in this world. So give some thought if you would like to contribute and help sponsor the class for this year. That'd be great. And you can just let me know. You can send me an email. It'll be fine. All right, today is the 10th of Tevet. It is a fast day. It is one of our several fast days that are days of sadness on the Jewish calendar connected to the destruction of the temple in Yerushalayim. Now, the 10th of Tevet is also, interestingly, a fast day that is the connection of three sad days, the 8th, 9th, and 10th day of Tevet, commemorating three different things. And the truth is, I don't have, except for the 10th of Tevet, I'm not sure which things happen on the 8th or the 9th, but it's all, the rabbis were like, we're not having three fast days. We're not going to have three sad days in a row, because mostly we are happy. Even when we're sad, we're happy. So we have just the one fast day that holds all of it. The three things are, you might remember this from previous years, but the three things are the death of Ezra the scribe, Ezra HaSofer, who was also the last prophet of the Jewish people. Not only was he a prophet, he's the one who led the Jewish people from Babylonia after the Babylonian exile. Oh, thank you. The Babylonian exile back to Jerusalem to rebuild the second temple. And he led a group that not everybody went. It was like the wealthy people who had gotten very acclimated and assimilated into Babylonia. They kind of stayed put, and the poorer people went back. So it was kind of an interesting group that went back, all under Ezra's leadership. But Ezra was a scribe. He was the sage of the generation. He was a teacher. He was the person who was also able to navigate and negotiate. He was a great political strategist. He was a good businessman. He was very socially adept. He was just an incredible, great person. And so that is Ezra the scribe. And when we lost Ezra, that was like the last of our people. So that's a sad day. Excuse me. The second thing is that it was the day of the forced translation of the Torah into Greek from the Hebrew, where 70 elders were put in solitary confinement and forced to come up with a translation of the Torah into Greek. However, a great miracle did happen, which was all of their translations were the same. They were identical. Would have caused even more of a difficulty had they come out differently. Somebody did joke and say the bigger miracle would have been if the 70 rabbis would have been in one room and came up with just one translation, because probably would have been arguing. Not that Jews argue, but it's possible that we could have been arguing. But 70 did come up with the same. This translation was done not to facilitate learning of Torah, but to de-sanctify it and to put it at the realm of Shakespeare, and to put it just on the shelf in the library as like, here's this great literature, pick it up and read something, but don't do it. So as we know, the same Greeks also forbade the practice of Judaism. So you could have the Torah to read as literature, but not to practice. So that is a tragic day. It's called the day of the caging of the bird, where it wasn't killed, but it was flattened. And we're going to talk about the ramifications of that. And then the third thing is the day the siege of Jerusalem began. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, who laid siege to Jerusalem on the outside for 3 years in an attempt to starve the Jews out. And then after 3 years, on the 17th of Tammuz, successfully breached the walls of Jerusalem. And then 3 weeks later was Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. So this is considered the beginning of the end, which was the siege. So there's the siege, the breach in the walls, and then the destruction. So the siege is kind of like where it started. And for 3 years, it said the Jewish people had the power to change that trajectory. If they would have done teshuvah, if they would have repented for what they were doing and how off track they had become spiritually, they could have turned the tide, but they didn't. And they didn't listen to their prophets that they had, and they didn't believe that God would allow the temple to be destroyed, because the temple had already stood for 400 years. I think when something has stood for 400 years, you start to think something is permanent and that there's no way. And so they didn't listen. So this is the day when we think about listen to what's the signs around us and make changes while we can, and before things proceed to a more difficult place. We're taught also that on the 10th of Tevet, determination is made about whether there will be a Tisha B'Av this coming year or not, whether things are going to follow the path that they have been on, or whether we're going to take the bull by the horns and steer things in a different direction. So it says it's easier to change things before they get too far along than once already down. They talk about it's easier to keep a donkey from falling than trying to pick it up once it's down. It's like, it's easier to steady it. So this is our day when we try to do that. So those are things that are going on. Interestingly, too, the 10th of Tevet is also understood by our sages as likely the date that Jesus was born, and Jesus coming into the world and the problem with that. Now, while we want to say that Judeo-Christian, etc., is a very nice thing, etc., Christianity has not been a good thing for the Jewish people as a people. You should listen to a class by Rabbi Kelman or Rabbi Katz on Christmas and the origins of Christmas and the celebrations of Christmas and all the things that I like to look at and seem so sweet and beautiful were all horrific things and horrific omens for the Jewish people that were responsible for pogroms. I don't even want to talk about it, like horrible, horrible things. So Jesus coming onto the scene, we can talk about the good things that it has brought, but it was definitely a step in the wrong direction for a lot of humanity, a step in the right direction for pagans, a step in the wrong direction for Jews. So it's been very problematic. So the 10th of Tevet, which in 2020 fell out on Christmas Day, just as an interesting thing, that those dates coincided. So we have these things that all happened, and the question is, what do they all have to do with each other, and what can we learn, and what do we want to understand, especially for this year? This is from a class from Rabbi Yaakov Hamer, so I want to give him credit, class I listened to. All of these things that happen to us have to do with narrowing and constricting and kind of the noose tightening around us. So whether it is the flattening of the Torah into Greek and having it being, demoted as something unique and holy and special and spiritual, or whether it's the siege, which is literally the attempted strangulation of the Jewish people and of Jerusalem, or Ezra dying and having prophecy go out and that light go out for us, or whether it's Jesus coming on the scene and claiming to be the new person who's going to bring God to the world. All of those things are considered ways that we are being diminished and constricted. So we should kind of feel like this on the 10th of Tevet, not actually dead and not, penetrated, but just the noose is there. And that is the energy of the 10th of Tevet. So We want to understand like what's going on at a bigger metaphysical level. You'll notice that there are no protests or marches or anything going on today of we hate Babylonia. Okay, we don't hate Babylonia, we don't hate Rome. Jews love to go to Rome. It's always just amazes me when there are, holiday packages, spend Pesach in Italy, it's like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Or in Egypt or whatever it is, like we like going all this, we love all of these other countries. So what is it they stand for though? Babylonia is today's Iraq. So I don't think anybody's having a Passover thing in Iraq. Just as an aside, I'll tell you, there has been a resurgence in Iran about accusing the Jews of ethnic cleansing and a Holocaust from Esther, from the Megillah. They bring this up periodically, but Iran is giving this now as the reason why they can never under any circumstances recognize Israel or the Jewish people, is because of the Holocaust that was perpetrated against them at the time of Purim by Queen Esther. So just as an aside, if for you it's become like a little fun little holiday in the world, this is a very real thing and is cause for all sorts of attention. So it behooves us to learn more about it and what our enemies are seeing. But going back to our others, which is Iraq, Babylonia. So we need to understand what Babylonia represents. So in Hebrew, the word for Babylonia is Bavel. Now, Bavel is also translated as Babel, and that might ring a bell for you. What's Babel? What is that? What Torah story do we know about that?
They built the tower to get to God.
Exactly, the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel. And it says, because of that God confused their language. And the word for confusing is the word babble, just like how we use the English word that somebody is babbling. What does that mean that somebody's babbling? It means that they're talking in a way that is, you can't understand them. They're babbling. So the concept of Babylonian, what Bavel represents, is confusion, spiritual confusion. And that this is like the two forces. There's the force of Bavel, and there's the force of Yerushalayim. And Yerushalayim, which is, and Yisrael. So there's Bavel and Yisrael. Yisrael comes, one of the ways to understand that word is Yashar El, which means straight with God, as opposed to Babel. It's like they're two opposite things. These two things cannot coexist. Either you've got confusion or you've got clarity. It says all of the battles that are around Jerusalem, the Jewish people, are about this thing, about people wanting to create their own spiritual, whatever, usually egocentric thing, and impose that on the Jewish people to destroy Jerusalem, destroy the Jewish people, to destroy Israel. It's like, why do so many people care about this? What is this battle? So the other thing that happened, and this was just not that long ago, and I had it was in 2007, which wasn't really that long ago, but I had long forgotten about it. But since I'm going through my papers, I'm finding all these things, is Saddam Hussein was hanged on the 9th of Tevet. So he was in this realm of the 8th, 9th, and 10th of Tevet, and he was obsessed with Nebuchadnezzar. He was obsessed with his connection to Nebuchadnezzar. So what's interesting, and then he spoke about it quite openly, and he was obsessed with destroying Jerusalem, which you think is like, it's not even in your country. You're in Iraq. What even is it to you? But this obsession transcends geography. So in 1979, it says, Saddam Hussein was quoted by his semi-official biographer saying, Nebuchadnezzar stirs in me everything relating to pre-Islamic ancient history. And what is most important to me about Nebuchadnezzar is the link between the Arabs' abilities and the liberation of Palestine. That is why whenever I remember Nebuchadnezzar, I like to remind the Arabs, Iraqis in particular, of their historical responsibility, which is to liberate Jerusalem from the Jews. It's a burden that should spur them into action because of their history. And in fact, his final words, literally as the trap door opened beneath him when he was hanged, was, Palestine is Arab. Okay, he was just in his every waking moment was obsessed about trying to rid the world of the Jewish people and of destroying Israel and having it go in a different direction. It's like, this is really crazy, but he wasn't the first. Emperor Hadrian insisted on renaming Israel Palestina, obliterating its Jewish past and replacing it with the derogatory name that means foreign invaders, the Plishtim, and renaming Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina, dedicating the city to the Roman gods of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. So it's like all of this, the whole world is like, what is the obsession? And the obsession comes from either a conscious or a subconscious realization that Israel, and specifically Jerusalem, is the top of the world. It is the highest place. And we don't mean it's like Mount Everest. It's the highest spiritual place with the deepest spiritual connection, and everyone wants to claim it as theirs. And they cannot bear that it's for the Jewish people, for all of humanity, because it's meant to be a city for everyone, the gathering for everyone, but under the auspices of the Jewish people. It's called the Dome of the Rock Mosque because that rock is called Even Hashti'ah, the foundation rock from which all of creation emanated. There had to be a first place. The physical world, it has to start from a first place. It was there. That was the place. And we say like, oh, that's just your mythology. It's like, well, interesting. If it's just like a little mythology, the entire world seems to have bought into it. For one side or the other, everybody knows it. And so having control over this place has been every empire's dream since the beginning of time. It's pretty crazy if you think about it. And yet the land will only flourish when it's under the Jewish people. Otherwise, it lays desolate. It's as if God turns it off. It's like, it's not happening. You can salt it. They've tried everything. They salted it. They burned it. They expelled us. They killed us. It's like, and here we are. Can you imagine what this does to them? It makes them crazy. And here we are. We're there. And, I just think about my little grandchildren, maybe your grandchildren, your nieces, nephews, or your family, whatever. We're just walking down the streets of in the old city going, oh, let's stop at Holy Bagel and getting a bagel. It's like, to us, it's like ordinary, but this is extraordinary. It is an extraordinary reality that we are living in. So on this day, we talk about the fact, but it's not totally ready to go because we don't have the Holy Temple. So it's like being excited to be home, but your parents only let you in. You get to look at the, what's it called? If you have a big lawn and you have a retaining wall with a garden, and you're like, oh yes, I'm home for the holidays. Like, well, where are you? Well, I'm standing at the retaining wall. It's like, but did your mom let you in the house? No, they're not letting me in the house yet, but I'm so happy to be at the retaining wall. It's like, that's what we have is the kotel. But we're so happy to at least be at the retaining wall. And then up on top in the future will be the rebuilding of the temple. And it will happen. So on this day, we have to think about what we are missing and what our future holds for us, which is only great things. So what does the future hold for us? So one of the things we want to go back to is the idea of the Hebrew, of the translating things into Greek and how devastating that was. It says, what is it about Hebrew? It says that Hebrew is called, what's Hebrew called? It's always referred to as Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue. So people think, oh, it's the holy tongue. The Torah is written in Hebrew, my Siddur, my prayer book's written in Hebrew, the mezuzah's in Hebrew, tefillin's in Hebrew. So those are holy things. So they're written in a holy language. It's like, no, they are holy because they're written in the holy language. They are written in Hebrew. So it's the Hebrew itself that is holy. It says, what is that language? It says that language is the language of reality. It's the language of reality. It's the language we say that God used to create all of reality, all of existence. When we speak Hebrew or we say something in Hebrew, we are unlocking potential that we can't even fathom. And that having something translated into Greek is like my taking a picture of you, Marla, and saying, this is Marla. Be like, Well, it looks like Marla, and I can kind of relate to it as Marla, but I can't say that is Marla. Marla is the multi-dimensional, multifaceted, infinitely whatever of Marla. So to take something and say, well, I'm just take a picture of this, and now now we know what you are, and the rest of it doesn't really exist anymore. The Jewish people were commanded by the Greeks to, it says, to write on the horns of their oxen, we have no share in God. Like, we are not holy, there is no holiness, it's all nothing. It's like, the Yiddish word is verbrennt. They were so verbrennt, they were so, fired about wanting to be zealous about wanting us to be disconnected from our spiritual source. When we think about Hebrew, and we think about what it means to be able to not just speak in Hebrew conversationally, but to really understand it. And I know we've talked about it. We've learned over the years, we've studied the Hebrew letters. We take this for granted. If you went to a class, let's say you went to an alley class, I think that's what it's called, and they said, yes, we studied the English alphabet. You're like, studied what? Yeah, well, it's like, what are you in kindergarten? The letter for the week is A. What does that even mean? That doesn't even mean anything. Why, you're going to think of all the words you can think of that start with A? That has no meaning. And yet here, I've got a whole book here that's just a compendium. This is all on the Hebrew alphabet, and this is a short version that opens up and says every letter, every word has infinite layers of meaning, that everything can be derived from the Hebrew. The essence of reality is derived from Hebrew. And the essence of everything we need to know is derived from the Torah. So you've probably have heard the phrase that says, turn it and turn it, keep turning it, for everything is in it. It says, what does that mean? It means that everything is in it. So interestingly, we've just been reading in the Torah, we've been in the parsha of Joseph. We've been reading everything about Joseph. When Joseph meets his brothers, when he is reunited with them, and he has to get through to them that he is Joseph, and he's their brother, and they are in total shock. He doesn't look like their brother, he looks like an Egyptian. And in order to kind of prove that it is him, one of the things that he says is, hold on one second. Hold on a second, I wasn't planning to say this. Let me see this. It says it's on near page 253. Okay, I'm sorry, page 255, chapter 45, verse 12. And he says, behold, this is Joseph talking to his brothers. Your eyes see, as do the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that is speaking to you. He says, what does it mean that's my mouth speaking to you? So the commentary says he spoke to them in Hebrew. Now, he could be a linguist. He knows Hebrew. Other people know Hebrew. But what did he mean when he said that? Because I'm speaking Lashon HaKodesh. I'm speaking the holy language. My language is pure, and I speak it fluently, and all the years that I've been in Egypt did not distort my thinking. My thinking, I am based in reality, even though I have been living in Egypt and subjected to all of the cultural assimilation and pressure that would bring. I am speaking to you in Hebrew. And that this is what convinces the brothers that they are in fact with Joseph. Joseph himself, remember, after he interprets the dreams for Pharaoh, it's like, how does Pharaoh describe him? So for that, we have to go back and take a look at that. So when Pharaoh recognizes Joseph's greatness, and he is then said, hold on one second, page 229, this is chapter 41, verse 37 of Genesis. So after Joseph interprets the dream and says what should be done, kind of what the economic policy should be, verse 37, the matter appeared good in Pharaoh's eyes and in the eyes of all his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, Could we find another like him, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has informed you of all this, there can be no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and by your command shall all my people be sustained. Only by the throne shall I outrank you. The label that he is given is so discerning and wise. And in Hebrew, that's navon v'chacham. Navon is related to the word bina, which is understanding, and chacham, like a chacham, is wise. Bina and Chachma, which are at the top of the mystical tree of life of the Sfirot of Bina, Chachma, and Bina, of you are this kind of person. Why did Pharaoh call him this? Why does Pharaoh call him a Chacham and a Navon? What is it that Joseph did? So partly you'd say he was a great dream interpreter and he had this great idea. The question is, where does he come off being a dream interpreter? And where does he come off being somebody who knows how to form an economic policy that nobody else could think of? After you've been sitting in a dungeon in Pharaoh and you're like a kid, like, where did that come from? Said he studied Torah and he knew Lashon HaKodesh. He knew Hebrew and he was able, says that somebody who delves into Torah, they don't just learn the parsha, they learn the parsha. So parsha just doesn't mean like the parsha of the week. It means the portion of the events in life. It's even called that in the it's kind of funny. People refer to it when somebody is at the stage of dating for marriage, they say, oh, they're in the parsha. And then when I first heard that, I thought, like the parsha of like, what parsha is that parsha Chaye Sarah? Is that the parsha of Yitro? Like what parsha is that? It's like, no, that's called the parsha. That's like the time of life that they are in. So knowing what the parsha is a catchword for knowing the lay of the land, what's going on in the world, and having a deep understanding of it. It says, how did Joseph know this? He hadn't studied anything. He had not studied economics. He had not studied agriculture. He had not studied sociology. He hadn't studied any of those things. He hadn't studied weather patterns. He hadn't studied, read the almanac. He says he was tuned into God and Torah, even before Torah was given in the flesh. And that gave him a wisdom that was beyond what he should have understood. And that's what Pharaoh is calling him. When he calls him a navon v'chacham, that you have this insight and this wisdom and understanding. He says, and this is what is supposed to come to the Jewish people. This is what the Jewish people are supposed to be known for. That's our claim. The people will look at us and say, wow, what a wise and discerning nation. They study Torah so deeply, they know things that they shouldn't know because they never studied them directly, but they got it all from the Torah. How is that possible? So the Torah itself says this about us, that that's what the nations in the future are going to say about us. So if you go to Deuteronomy, Devarim, page 961, which is chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. This is parsha V'et Hanan. This is before Moshe dies. This is the book of Deuteronomy, which he's speaking to the Jewish people before he passes away. And verse 5 starts out, see, I have taught you decrees and ordinances as Hashem, my God, has commanded me to do so in the midst of the land to which you come to possess it. You shall safeguard and perform them, for it is your wisdom and discernment in the eyes of the peoples of the nations who shall hear all these decrees and who shall say, surely a wise and discerning people is this great nation. For which is a great nation that has a God who is close to it, as is Hashem our God whenever we call to him. And the words that are used are the same that were described for Joseph. It's the different form because of the grammar of plural, but it's called Chachmatchem, which means your Chachma, Uvinatchem, and your Bina. That is how you're going to be known to the nations. People are going to marvel at what you know and your wisdom, not in a way to lord over anybody, but in a way to be helpful. and have insight and wisdom into the nature of the world. It's going to come from you. And that's what people are going to say. And if they're not saying it yet, means we still have work to do. It means we still have work to do in learning our Torah, plumbing its depth, getting past the bramble of everything, the Babel that is all around us, the Babylonia that is around us, and getting into the Yashar Yisrael. Yosef was able, for him as a person, it says that what Yosef was as an individual is what the Jewish people are meant to be to all of humanity. Just as Yosef was a gift to Pharaoh and to the Egyptian people, they saw him as a gift, but then they conveniently forgot about him after a few generations, and then that's when the enslavement of the Jews begins. But the enslavement of the Jews begins in Egypt when the Jewish people forget who they are. It says, what comes first? First, the Jewish people forget, and then everybody else forgets. So when we remember, everyone else will remember. But we have to step up and claim it. If we don't, the world just walks all over us. Then the siege begins, and the babble, the confusion will just surround us and consume us. Not forever, because we're promised to be the eternal nation. But seriously, folks, I think we've had enough. It's time to make this stop. We need to do our part. So Joseph is able to convey to his brothers, I'm speaking Hebrew, not because I'm a linguist and I'm really good with languages, but because I am tuned into clarity. That's how I know what I've known, and that's how I even know why all of this happened. I know you meant to sell me, you meant it for bad, but I mean it, God meant it for good. I'm here to take care of you. I'm here to save you spiritually and physically, and to prepare the way for us to be here before we are redeemed finally to go back to the land of Israel. And he has not forgotten the centrality of Israel. You would think, after spending all those days in Egypt, not days, years in Egypt, and being promoted to second in command in Egypt, you'd think Joseph would become like an Egyptophile, Egypt is really the place to be. The Jews have fallen for that every place they've been. Berlin is the new Jerusalem. Spain is the new Israel. Fill in the blank is the new Holy Land. We keep falling into the same trap. But Joseph didn't. And how do we know that he knew that the land of Israel was still the highest place? The very kind of simple phrase that he says to his brothers after they are reunited going back to page 255. On 255, let's get to it, sorry. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Speak about being confused. I'm going the wrong direction, my gosh. Page 255, when he tells his brothers after they've been reunited to go back and get Jacob and the rest of the family, he could have just said, go back and get dad. Hurry up and go back and get dad. But he doesn't say that. He says, Maharu va'alu el avi, which means hurry, go up to my father. Go up from the word aliyah. Go up to the land of Canaan, go up to the land of Israel to my father. It's like, I may be the second in command in Egypt, but I know where the true highest place in the world is, which is the land of Israel. So that's what I said. I always thought it's kind of funny when we say like you're making aliyah. That's just like a weird phrase. That's a translation of the Hebrew la'asot aliyah. But in English, it doesn't. If you tell somebody who is not Jewish, we're making aliyah, they don't even know what you're talking about. First of all, I don't know what aliyah is, and what do you mean you're making it? Like, what does that even mean? So you just say, oh, we're moving to Israel. Like, well, moving to Israel is a little different than making aliyah. So think of that when we read the Torah and somebody is called up, it's called an aliyah. Even just to be able to come up to the Torah, that anything that is high spiritually is called an aliyah. So the land of Israel is an aliyah, Hebrew is an aliyah, Torah is an aliyah, all of that. And so when we talk about the Torah being translated into Greek, it's called a yeridah. It's called a going down, as opposed to a going up. It says there were 3 days of darkness when the Torah was translated into Greek. because the Torah is or, is light. Hebrew is broad, expansive, infinite, deep, beyond our full comprehension. And take a snapshot of it and say, this is reality. It's like that can ever be reality. So this was what Joseph says to his brothers: go up to my father, make aliyah, go up, and then bring, and we say, and what do we say? We say, go down to Egypt. And it's not just that it's the direction it is, it's literally going down. It's going down because Egypt represented that. Renee, is that your hand up there?
Yeah, it is. How do you say go down in Hebrew?
Yerida, Yud Resh Daled, from the word yored, which means to come down, and aliyah, to go up. So on this day, we're really focusing on, can we get it right? Because we're promised in the future that the 10th of Tevet is going to be a holiday. It's going to be a Yontif. It's going to be a day of happiness when we get it right. So why not this year? Of like, let's get it right this year, and let's not have Tisha B'Av. Let's not have Tisha B'Av as a day of sadness again this year. We need to fix it. So we should be known as people navon v'chacham, like Joseph. Oh, I started to say about Joseph that he was a gift to Pharaoh and a gift to the Egyptian people. That's what the Jewish people are meant to be. We are a gift to humanity, and we're meant to serve. Oh, the aliyah, thank you. Esther just asked what the aliyah for a person who died. Yes, the same idea. When we do something in memory of someone and we say it should be an aliyah for their neshama, because the potential to have greater and greater closeness to God's Shekhinah, divine presence, is infinite. It's not just like there's maximum good seats and those are the best ones we have. It's like infinitely closer. And so when we do something for an aliyah for their neshama, it means that our actions are causing their neshama to have a greater and greater closeness to God. So anything that's about that, that's a spiritual elevation, is about a closeness. We have a day of the week that is called the elevated day of the week, which is Shabbos. It says on Shabbos, it says we get a neshama yetera, we get an expanded Shabbos. Everything really about spirituality is about expansiveness. The land of Israel is called an expansive land. Now, I don't know, you can go from one side of it physically to the other side in just a matter of hours, literally hours. I mean, from where our apartment's going to be, which is on one edge, like basically almost at the Jordan River, to where our kids live, which is almost at the Mediterranean Sea, we can get there really quickly. So you're telling me that's an expansive place? What does that even mean? It says it's expansive, that when you're there, you can be expansive. It says the Torah that you learn in Israel has a quality to it that is unlike, it says the air, the quality of it is different. Same thing about Shabbos. So Shabbos is in time what Israel is in space. It says on Shabbos, the Torah you learn on Shabbos is of infinitely greater, deeper significance than the Torah you learn during the rest of the week, because it is a time of expansiveness. So this tiny nation is meant to be like burst into the world, not to control it, but to contribute to it. And what we have to contribute is clarity. And that's what the world has always fought against. They wanted paganism, they wanted whatever it is they wanted, their own version of reality. They're always trying to make it into something else. And they always try to destroy it. Throughout human history, when other countries vanquish other nations, they don't destroy it. They use it. They use the resources, they use whatever's there. It was like, why not? Take it over. They take it over, they don't destroy it. There's been something always that there has been an urge to destroy what is Jewish and what is holy. That's a whole other level of something. So on one hand, of course, it has been horrific and devastating. On the other, so Beth Ann is asking, what is the Hebrew word for clarity? So something that's clear is, let's see, Daisy, you can help me out with this, or Esther, the Hebrew word exactly for clarity is like, I want to say barur, means that something is clear. Barur. Esther, Daisy, if you have a different word, there's probably different words for clarity. Yeah, but if you say something is barur, that means it's clear. The world is a confusing place. And we're told that before Mashiach comes, there will be even, you'd think like before Mashiach comes, things will be getting clearer. No, before Mashiach comes, we're going to go into even more confusion. It will become even more confusing. And people will be confused in language. They will call one thing another. They will call good bad, bad good. They will mix up. They will create new definitions for things that do not describe reality. And the world will go a little bit crazy, or a lot. And then there will be clarity. Marla.
I feel like we're there already.
I'd say we're there.
Yeah.
I think we're there. It gets more and more bizarre every day. And just when you think you've got to be kidding. And not only that, not only is it confused, but just like the Jewish people didn't want to listen to their prophets who had that, because also nevuah is also means clarity. That's what nevuah is, to have clarity. And what did the Jewish people do to some of their prophets? Either they didn't listen to them or they killed them. I was like, I don't want to hear it. I'd rather be confused. I'd rather listen to a false prophet who tells me what I want to hear. And a person who speaks truth is not only just like, oh, that's ridiculous, but you're attacked. So we know that things are, that's why our sages say, Mashiach will come, and I don't want to be there beforehand, because how it's going to be beforehand is going to be a wild ride. It's going to be a wild ride. So what's our goal? So it's like, okay, thanks a lot. Now what am I supposed to do? It's like, hang on to your clarity. Hang on to your Hebrew and understand what things really mean. Definitions of words in whatever language are important. You cannot willy-nilly redefine words. Words mean what they mean. And in Hebrew, for sure. Having clarity and being able to see through the babbling is essential. And then we will know that ultimately Tevet, the month of Tevet, can also be read as Tovot. Okay, we're in the month of Tovot, Besorot Tovot, of good news. It's like the good news will be delivered in the month of Tevet also. But we have to be able to hang on. And so maybe we find ourselves like Joseph. He was alone in a world that was morally decayed of Egypt, surrounded with all sorts of pressures, social, economic, spiritual, and he kept his Hebrew. The other thing it says, which I think as women, this kind of makes us squirm a little bit, but I guess men feel differently about this. It says he also showed his brothers his circumcision. Like, okay, that sounds embarrassing, but I guess guys think about these things differently than we do. And they were like, okay, you are one of us. So it was the same thing. It's like, what does showing your circumcision mean? Okay, so there were people in Egypt who were circumcised. Actually, Joseph insisted that people who wanted to participate in his economic program circumcise themselves. So, and the Egyptians didn't want to do it, and they complained to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was like, whatever he said to do, you just need to do it. So there were a whole bunch of Egyptians walking around with circumcision. So what was so different about Yosef's? It's like the brothers could tell. They had, even though they were wrong for selling him and a whole bunch of other things were not right, they had the spiritual eyes to see, oh, that's a Brit Milah. That's not just a circumcision. So it's meant the covenant, I'm keeping the covenant. So I'm keeping like the purity of body and soul. And that's what he was telling his brothers. And so that's how you can tell my father, Od Yosef Chai. Joseph is still alive. Not just, we found him, you'll never believe it, but he is intact spiritually and physically, which is an amazing thing. Think about even people who God forbid, served in war, they were POWs, or they were whatever, went through the Holocaust, did not survive intact. They survived physically, but they did not survive intact. Either their faith was shaken, their bodies were broken, whatever it might be. But Joseph is saying, I'm straight with you here, and I'm intact spiritually and physically, and don't let my garb as the second head of everything in the world of Egypt make you think otherwise. I am a chacham and a navon. I am a wise and discerning person. Go tell Dad. He can rejoice in the fact that I'm alive, not just that I've been found, but that I'm intact. So this is what Joseph is, and he represents this, and it's a challenge. So I think it's interesting then that the blessing that we give our sons is, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh, who were Joseph's sons, who were born and raised in Egypt. And there's many reasons for having that be the blessing, but not the least of which is, look how they did under Joseph's guidance, that they emerged unassimilated, completely connected to their Jewish identity and intact. And you guys, you all should be like that. That blessing speaks volumes, I think, to our children and the people, and men and women in our world, who are struggle with all the challenges it means to be in exile. So we are in exile today because of the 10th of Tevet and what was not accomplished in the 3 years of the siege of Jerusalem. And we did not use that time well. We squandered it, and we took what could have been an amazing time of teshuvah and just fought and bickered amongst ourselves, did not listen to the prophets, the true prophets, listen to the false prophets who said what we wanted to hear. And then things went from bad to worse. So every 10th of Tevet is a time to reevaluate. It's like, okay, it's like we're resetting the clock. What's it going to be? What is this going to be? The siege is beginning. The siege is here. Are we going to do something different this time around? We can't expect different results if we take the exact same actions that we took before. So that's the height of insanity. To say, well, when will things get better? It's like, what did you do to change things? So we have to ask ourselves the question, what are we going to do differently? So the 10th of Tevet, the month of Tevet, is going to be a time of Bisarot Tovot, a time of good news. It's going to be a time of change. It will eventually be a holiday, but it's not there yet. But we have to look at it, just even looking at the word Tovot and Tevet, of seeing that the goodness is there. It's there, it's just not there yet. So amazing things have happened. Humanity has made tremendous strides. And now we're at the time we're at on the spiritual clock, we're considered to be at Friday afternoon, before Shabbos being the time of redemption. And Friday afternoon in most people's homes is a balagan, everything looks worse before it looks better. It's like how your house looks while you're changing dishes to get ready for Pesach. Every year I hyperventilate. That time when all your chametz dishes are out and all your Pesach dishes are in boxes. You're like, this is never going to come together. And then magically, with a lot of effort, not really magic, it does. And Friday, magically, time to light the candles and peace descends. It's like, I didn't think it was possible. So we're in the Friday afternoon of human history, which means all the undone work, all of the, I call it all the stuff that's been hiding, has to come out and be resolved. All of the, all of the issues, whether it's mental health, whether it's shalom bayit, whether it is all these things about our oppression of other people, all of these things have to come out, and there has to be clarity and honesty, because it's only in that place can we really fix anything. And if we've just all the things that just get swept under the carpets. So yeah, exactly, the original inconvenient truth, very inconvenient truth. So I have to tell you, it was very interesting, very sad and interesting. I'm not going to even share the name, and I don't want to have anybody else say anything about it. But there is a very, very prominent Jewish author in the religious world who has come out about sexual improprieties with numerous people. And really horrible, because this person is very well known and is a great author. I had a book of his on the shelf, writes amazing books for kids about how to deal with life's challenges, such as unwanted advances from people, and just like the worst thing. And I was pleasantly surprised to see the Orthodox world in many sectors jump right on it, pull his books from their shelves, stop selling it, disinvite him from anything, and they have cut off their ties with him. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that would not have happened. It would have been, But now there is a momentum, and it's like, now I know somebody is innocent until proven guilty and all that. However, these kind of allegations from the number of people, what can I say? It's like, that all has to come out. All the hypocrisy has to come out, and there has to be clarity. And so we have to face all these, as was very well said, all of the inconvenient truths. Now, it's very easy for us to point our fingers and say, yeah, they have to really come face to face with whatever. But just look in the mirror for each of us and say, what are the inconvenient truths I have not wanted to face in my own life? What I'm doing, how I'm acting, the choices I'm making, what am I just like conveniently like, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to know it, I don't have to do it. All of us are in that same round. We cannot expect to be the beacons of clarity and wisdom for the world if we don't have it ourselves. So the work starts at home with ourselves, me, myself, and I, and then we can reach into others. It's very easy to confess other people's confusion. It's more important for us to ask, where am I confused? Because people are not crazy. The Babylonians were brilliant. The Greeks were brilliant. The Egyptians were brilliant. They contributed incredible things to humanity and to civilization. But moral and spiritual clarity, they did not. That is the gift of the Jewish people. So while we busy ourselves trying to give all the other gifts, that's all well and good, but our most important gift is moral and spiritual clarity. So that's our task for the month of Tevet. Hopefully we can turn this ship around and go in a different direction and get to the place we need to be. So just remember, people are going to say about you that you are a nivona. Actually, it's related to the word in Hebrew, a maven, someone who's a maven. There used to be a store in Denver called the Three Mavens. It was like a Judaica store. To be a maven, they said this, I've heard this on American news. Oh, there's such a maven in this. That comes from the word mavin, a navon, someone who deeply understands something, meaning the world, reality. Okay, so we are meant to be mavens. We are meant to be a navona and a chachma, and that is who we are meant to be. And the more we work on ourselves, the greater gift we can be to humanity. Thoughts or questions? It's a small job, but what else are we going to do with your life?
One day at a time, one day at a time.
One day at a
step
time. I was going to say one choice at a time, one moment at a time. Is like the question to ask is like, do I have clarity about this? And I have to say, one of the things we should assume is that we don't, because we have our own personal bias. Everyone else thinks that everybody else is biased. They are so biased. It's like, well, hello, everybody is biased by their own experiences and their own personal makeup, their own whatever it is. Our assumption is that we are biased, and therefore we must seek some sort of external measure to help us ascertain how much clarity we have. Because when we were, I'm just going to use my grandchildren as an example, because they are just normal people. Does your mother want you to have this? Oh, yes. I know she said that I could have this. well, let's just put it aside until we double it. No, no, no. She said, I'm sure I heard her say that. I'm like, oh, that's okay. Well, we'll just wait until we find that out. It's like, yeah, I'm sure it's okay. You know, I checked with me, myself, and I, and the three of us decided that it was good. So we do that. So it's funny to laugh at, you know, a little grandkid, but we all do that with lots of things in our lives. Yeah, I checked with me, myself, and I, and we decided, yeah, that's a good decision. So we're supposed to assume that we don't have clarity and get clarity, and we're obligated to do that. And ignorance is no excuse, okay? Especially for a Jewish person. Ignorance is no excuse. Renee, do you want to unmute? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Associated, but a little off track. But I have a question about something that you kind of clarified today, actually. So I know a lot of people love Yiddish, and I respect it.
Yeah.
But I personally have a hard time with it because it reminds me of German.
Oh.
And all the overlays with that. I was talking to somebody recently who said, no, this is this person's viewpoint, okay? And it just kind of opened up the door for me a little bit, but I want to know what you think of it. Because we're talking about Hebrew being, you know, the holy language.
Yes.
So he said that in fact, he thinks Hebrew is more of a secular language, and that I'm just going to finish this whole thing, okay?
Okay.
But I'm like, I don't know. So I would love to hear your take on it, right? He said Hebrew is a secular language, and that Yiddish is actually more true to the Jewish soul or the Jewish neshama, because Yiddish, because as the people like left, you know, during, you know, diaspora, and they went to all these neighboring, like, you know, German and all these European countries, like in the same thing with Ladino,
Right.
you know, the
Right.
Spanish Hebrew,
Yeah.
that the more the Jewish people like to keep. Thank you, Beth Ann. Right, Babel. Anyway, that's what he said, and I was like, I don't know. I still have a hard time with Yiddish because of that, because I feel like I didn't understand why didn't we? No, I forgot. Why didn't we take, what's that other language we used to use all the time?
Aramaic.
Yeah. So when we were in the diaspora, why don't we take Aramaic with us? If Hebrew was supposed to be our spiritual Torah language, and that Aramaic was our everyday language. What I want to know is why, you know, we didn't combine German and Aramaic, or why don't we combine Spanish and Aramaic? Okay.
Okay, so a couple things in there. Number one, Yiddish is actually considered a very special language, such as if you have a Yiddish name, you know, in the early days of Israel's statehood, if you came with a Yiddish name, they made you change it into a Hebrew name. Or like, for example, my mother, when she went to Sunday school, her name was Shana Sarah, which is now the name of my granddaughter. And she was told, you can't have that name. You have to have a Hebrew name. And they turned it into Yafa Sarah, which means the same thing, only in Hebrew. So a lot of this may have happened to you when you went to Hebrew school, that your name was somehow poo-pooed if it was Yiddish and turned into Hebrew. That was a state kind of thing. That's like the political thing about like not wanting to be associated with the shtetl, and we're the new Jews and the land of Israel, etc. So there's peace. So there's a lot of threads of what you're saying. Yiddish was a language not just spoken by Jews in Germany, Jews of Russia, you know, the entire Eastern Europe. That was the common language that allowed Jewish people to communicate, was in Yiddish. So it served a tremendous benefit to unify the Jewish people, because people could trade and they could conduct business and they could, you know, merge families all through the use of Yiddish. So it was a great bonding for the people, has a tremendous power. And that in and of itself, and in fact, it's based on Hebrew, it's written in Hebrew characters, it has actually a tremendous amount of sanctity to it. However, it's not Hebrew. So someone could say that the Hebrew of Israel, the state of Israel today, is secular because it's used as the vernacular. Now, I have to say, there's pornography that is printed in Hebrew. There are things that are completely inappropriate that are printed in Hebrew because Israel is a nation, is a state with lots of different kinds of people. And so some people are like, I'm not speaking Hebrew. I'm talking about some like people in some religious strands were speaking Yiddish. Okay, and I will not speak Hebrew because it's become the language of the street, and it has been almost not exactly translated, but it's been dragged through the dirt. You know, even I have to say, there's something in me. I remember that the Road of Shalom gift shop. We carried a doormat that said Shalom on it. There's something about stepping on, which is fine. It says hello. You know, that sounds a perfectly nice thing. But when it was written in Hebrew, there's something about stepping on Hebrew letters. Even though it says Shalom, Shalom is one of the names of God. It was just something like, I can't sell this. I think I'm just going to send this back to the company. It just like really struck, like it sounded like a good idea in thought, but then it was like, no, I'm not doing this. So there is an argument that Hebrew has been, I'll call it devalued by turning it into the street language. And that's kind of discouraging, but Hebrew in and of itself, one could never say Hebrew is a secular language because it is called Lashon HaKodesh. That's in fact the objection, is that you're taking a language that is holy and you're dragging it through the mud. Now, I also think how privileged the people are who live in Israel, who speak Hebrew as their daily language, and when they go to daven or read the Torah, they actually know what every word means. How fortunate for them. How fortunate. However, even though they know what it means in a translation, doesn't mean they know what it means. So it's not like, I'm an Israeli, I don't need to study the Torah because I know what that says. That would be incorrect. So they could almost end up with a misperception of what it is that they know, but they certainly can read it fluently, and that's a big advantage. Does that help Renee kind of understand that?
A little bit closer, but how about why Hebrew? Why not Aramaic?
Because Aramaic was the language of the place where the Jewish people lived. It wasn't, so the language, what has developed is whatever is the language of the place that the Jews were living became, just like Ladino became the Jews of Spain because it was Spanish in Hebrew, and then German in Hebrew. So it was the language of the place. So people didn't retain a knowledge of Aramaic. That went away very quickly because if you don't speak the language, you don't remember it. So it had to be based on the language that they were speaking combined with Hebrew. So those became the two things. So that's why I think it's funny that in the Chumash, people used to have the Hebrew of the Torah translated into Aramaic. That was their translation. Now we go to art school and we read it in English. So it'd be almost as if we developed some sort of a language that was a combination of English and Hebrew, which if you listen to some Divrei Torah by some rabbis, they almost have, because they have taken Hebrew words and they use English grammar with Hebrew words and Hebrew verb endings. So if someone says, who's laning? Okay, who's laning? Okay, who's davening? ING. That's English. Daven is Yiddish and ing is English. So now we've got like a Yiddish English thing. I listened to a Devar Torah on Torah Anytime that was in Persian, mind you. And I thought, I'm going to understand it because it's an Orthodox rabbi and it's going to be mostly Hebrew, which it was. So the Persian I ignored and I just focused in on the Hebrew. Same thing in Spanish. If you listen to something in Spanish or in Ladino, if you don't understand it, if there's Hebrew in it, you will understand it because if you know the Hebrew. So thank God the Jewish people have had these ways of communicating because that's been essential for keeping our peoplehood. But Hebrew is the key. So even though there was a desire to secularize the Hebrew, and they've done this with spelling, for example. So words that were, let's take a word that should be spelled like with a vav, that is a, let's see now. I can't think of it offhand. They've changed some spellings, which in Hebrew, like you really shouldn't change the spelling because the spelling of the word is kind of sacred. And now we've got even more, which is we have English words spelled with Hebrew letters. So if you go to stores or places in Israel and you're trying to read something, you can't identify the Hebrew root because it's not Hebrew. It's English written in Hebrew letters. So it'll say discotheque, Daled Yud Samech Kuf Vav Tet Kuf, discotheque. Or when I was studying Hebrew, a person's job is a dog walker. So how do you say dog walker in Hebrew? Dog voker. And it's spelled, you know, Daled Vav Gimel. I'm like, what is this job? And it's like, oh, dog walker. I don't even recognize it. So it's turned into its own babble of, and that might be what a purist would object to. It's like, well, Hebrew, like, look what they're doing with that. But Hebrew in and of itself is a sacred language. The Hebrew of the Torah is sacred.
So probably when it's those kinds of words, the English words that are written in Hebrew are what? The secular words.
That is a secularization of Hebrew for sure.
Right.
However,
Yeah.
as we said, Israel is a state with people and doing whatever, and they're using the language. And some of it is fascinating. I mean, one of the things I love about Ulpan, that I'm sure I will continue to love about Ulpan, is seeing how they take words that are from the Torah or from whatever, or davening, and use them in some other form for a contemporary meaning, like the word atar, which appears in the Kaddish Shalem. Atar v'atar, God is in every place. Well, an atar in Hebrew is a website, because it's a place. It's like, you know, can you give me the name of the atar for, you know, ordering my cookies or whatever? It's like, oh, that is so funny. So in a way, it's really helpful, because then if you have the Hebrew background from Torah study and from davening, and you can web out and see like how they got to whatever they got to, then it's really interesting and fascinating. So, all right, ladies, if you're fasting, I hope you continue. It's a short fast. It's over like at 5:21, so just like in 2 hours. And mostly we should take the message of Tevet and find clarity. Don't let babbling besiege you, and find the clarity, break through, and hopefully we'll take the world to its next best place. And we will be the people who are navon v'chacham, wise and discerning. All
Thank
right,
you.
ladies, thank you so much.
So much.
Everybody be well. Thank you.
Take good care.
Be brave.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ellyn. Thank
Have a
you
good
so
week.
much, Lisa.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
All right,
Next week.
great. All right.
How are you, Ellen?
I'm good, Dorothy. How are you?
Well, good. My sister and brother-in-law were here last week.
Oh, how nice.
They live in Portland, and this was the first time since pre-pandemic. And
Oh my gosh.
I have to be honest and say that I really forgot about the class. So
That's totally okay. You should forget about the class. You should be focused on your family.
you had a
That's
good
so-
Thanksgiving with your family, and
We really did. We had, you know, just having Thanksgiving in Florida, and, you know, we had it outside around by the pool, because our kids' in-laws, our daughter's in-laws were with us as well, and they're very careful about COVID. So they wanted to be outside to eat, which was great in Florida. And
oh,
so we
sure.
set up tables, and then I went swimming Erev Hanukkah in their community pool. I'm like, well, I've never done that before. So
Yeah, where do your children live down here?
they live in Parkland.
Parkland, yeah.
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 So, you know,
That's not
close
too
enough
far
to,
from us. So
where do
but-
you live?
we live in Delray Beach.
Is that near Boca?
It just exactly north of Boca.
Nothing. Okay. All right. So
No.
this is great, because they're close enough to Boca to take advantage of all the kosher stores and
Oh
restaurants
yeah.
and markets.
Well,
Oh my gosh.
I have a
So fun.
kosher market a mile from me. So
That's great.
actually, they probably go to Grove in Boca,
Yes.
and what I have is Glicks, which is part of Grove. So
Yeah. Oh, yes. We went to Grove a couple of times to pick up things because we went to a pizza place that was in the same shopping center as.
yeah. Well,
So yeah, so fun.
Well, it's amazing to me to just, well, I mean, when we were in Denver, of course there was East Side, but
My
this
goodness.
is so much bigger than East Side.
Yes, it's
And
so, yeah, it was really fun.
growing up in Muncie, Indiana, and my mom buying meat, and I even remember the days when she bought the kosher meat, but then had to kosher it when
Oh, absolutely. I remember my mom koshering meat on the kitchen counter, on the
yeah,
koshering tray and tilting it and salting it and
all that
yeah,
stuff. So,
all that stuff.
but we were in New England with our kids for
Oh,
Thanksgiving,
so
and
nice.
it was just wonderful.
I'm
It was just
so glad. That's beautiful.
And I'm happy to tell you that Stacy's children are doing so well, such a blessing. And there was a hearing last Friday. Bob had petitioned the court to ease his house arrest. And the judge said, absolutely not. I mean, it's really pretty obvious that the judge does not like him, which is just fine.
Sounds good to me.
That's absolutely. And
I didn't know he was under house arrest. So
oh,
how long?
he's been under house arrest for 4 years, but he's been seen all over town and ridden his bike to Morrison and unbelievable. I mean, this man knows how to push the system and always has. But anyway, the trial is set for the beginning of April. And please God, it should just happen. But the judge
Yes.
is pretty sure that it is going to happen, and the prosecution has all our ducks in a row. And however, they had asked for an earlier trial, and Bob's lawyer said that he was going to be out of town. He is in New York now defending Ghislaine Maxwell.
Oh, yuck.
So this man must be a sleaze and go where the money. His name is Palooka. I mean, he's a big time Denver criminal lawyer, apparently. But anyway, we just so want it to be over.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, this has been going on far too long, far too long.
How long has it been, Dorothy, since?
Well, it will be 6 years in March.
I know it was at Purim. I remember that, but I didn't know it
Yeah,
was already
Purim.
6
Yeah,
years. Yeah.
Purim. Yeah. So, but I mean, we are hopeful that the end is in sight.
I hope so. And in the meantime, I'm so happy to hear that her kids are doing well.
They are. They are. They're happy. They have wonderful lives in Connecticut with our daughter and son-in-law, and our Boston daughter and son-in-law are part of it too. But
Nice.
you know, they have friends and they have activities. And Sydney, the Stacy's daughter, is conditioning for ski team.
Oh, good for her.
Team. And you know, Charlie is what his bar mitzvah was last June. Yeah, just last June. But he's an athlete, and he's such a boy, you know. such a boy. One day he said to our daughter, Aunt Liz, can I have a sleepover at Riley's? Riley is a girl.
Oh,
And she said, what? Well, there are going to be 3 boys and 3 girls, and the girls are going to sleep in the house and the boys are going to sleep in the pool house. Well, obviously they made these plans without speaking to any mother.
I think
Yeah.
so.
And it didn't happen.
Good.
Didn't happen.
Ay, ay, ay.
But I mean, already, because of the pandemic, his bar mitzvah was delayed, but he was just 14, but I think he's a player already. But he has Stacy's gorgeous big blue eyes.
Oh,
But they're wonderful kids, and we're so proud of all of our children. All of
that's
our
really, really wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that.
and they're our big ones, and they're our little ones, and everybody just needs to stay well.
That's right. To stay well, and you should have menucha. You should have rest from this whole case, and just to be able to close this part of the book.
right. When Sydney was little and she would finish something, she would say, "Done now."
Done
And I
now.
want it to be done now.
Done now. Done
Done
now.
now.
Yeah.
So, but
Well, keep me posted. I hope that you said in
Oh.
April, it's supposed to be in April.
Beginning of April. When is Pesach? I don't even know.
April 15th.
Oh, well, hope we may be in Denver for Pesach, you never know.
Yeah.
But I just, well, one of the things that I hate to keep you, but Bob
Fine.
has, he wants Sydney to testify.
On his behalf?
Yes. Why? I mean, this is because he loves her so much that he's going to put this 15-year-old on the stand. Well, his take is that Stacy was always sick, which is not true. Yes, Stacy was accident prone, but she was not sick. So I'm sure that's what they're going to ask, was mommy always sick? Well, first of all, it was 6 years ago. She doesn't really remember that much.
I was to say,
I mean, so, but this whole thing has just been such a nightmare, Ellen. I can't even.
it is a nightmare. It is a horrible nightmare.
It's a horrible nightmare that nobody should ever have to endure. It just, and this man is just, well, our Susan, our Boston daughter, has named him El Diablo.
Sounds appropriate.
Very appropriate. So I said, I don't wish ill for anyone, but if he would rot in hell for all eternity, it wouldn't make me sad.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if Trump got hit by a bus tomorrow, I wouldn't cry. But
Oh. Oh.
I mean, as I say, I don't, other than Bob, I don't wish ill on anyone.
That is really incredible. Now, does Sydney have to testify? If you're called to testify, does she have to?
Yeah, she does.
And that's the line of questioning, is about,
well, that's what
Stacy's health.
That's what we're assuming. But the prosecutor, who is a new prosecutor, and we met her, we had a Zoom meeting, liked her very much, is going to go to Westport and talk with her, and her therapist will be there too, and explain to her the process and make her feel as comfortable as possible, and wants to meet her before the trial. So
Yeah. And Dorothy is is that Bob's defense? Is it Stacy was sick and that's why she died in the shower?
Yes, yes. Even though it's because the autopsy was not read properly, it's right there in black and white that she was strangled. So, I mean, he's made up so many stories, so many lies. It just, he's, nice Jewish guy. You never
The-
know.
The woman he was involved with, is she,
She is going to testify that that he lied to her and told her he was divorced, and then she looked him up on Google. I mean, there are no secrets today.
that's right, there aren't.
And she called Stacy that morning and told her. And Stacy, I mean, this is all conjecture on our part, but we are sure that she said she wanted a divorce because we knew she'd been talking about it. This wasn't something that just popped up. And so that's why he killed her, because he wouldn't give her a divorce. So, I mean, it just defies anything that my mind can grasp. But hopefully soon it's going to be done now, and he'll be
Done now.
locked up forever.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sorry that Sydney has to be dragged through this.
I mean, it just
It's,
it tears my heart out that he's doing this to her. Yeah. It just, as I say, because he loves her so much. His children are so important to him.
clearly,
And they are court ordered to speak with him weekly.
I was just gonna ask you if they have contact with him,
Yeah, they have to talk to him every week.
really.
He'll keep Charlie on the phone for like an hour and a half. And we can't imagine what possibly he can be telling this child. I mean, when he's under house arrest, what kind of stories he's making up to tell Charlie. And Sydney doesn't talk to him very long.
Why is the court ordering them to have to talk to him?
I can't answer that. I don't know. Because he loves them and he needs to have contact with his children, I guess.
Somehow I think if you kill your children's mother, that you forfeit that.
You would think, huh?
I would think. I have a
But-
different approach to justice.
Well, this whole thing has made me think that, and I'm going to say something